As we saw in our last class, number 1, based on the way that we tune our musical instruments, if we start on a C and end on a C and play all naturals, no sharps or flats or no black notes, we'll have a C major scale. So we're going to stay in the key of C. C is our home. That's our one note, and we're going to go in the key of C major. This will be our scale notes again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and back to the 8. So here's what a triad is. A triad is a chord with 3 notes. In the key of C, there are 7 triads. What we do is we play every other note. So if you look the way my fingers are right now, this is the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th finger. My 1st and 3rd finger are on the 1st and 3rd note of the major scale or key. And my 5th finger is in the 5th note. And that's our first triad or chord. A triad is a chord, but not all chords are triads. Some chords can have more notes than 3, a lot more notes than 3, but a triad is a chord with 3 notes. So it's the most basic version of a chord. Now a chord or a triad is simply every other note being played together. We call this the root of the chord. We call this the 3rd of the chord because if you remember from last class, this is a major 3rd apart. And we call this the 5th of the chord because if you remember from last class, the root and the 5th note are a 5th apart. So this would be the root, the 3rd, and the 5th of a triad. When we describe the notes of a triad, we're going to label them as such. So there are 7 notes in the C major scale, 7 notes in the key of C major. So there will be 7 triads, each one starting on each note. So this is starting on the 1 note. So we call this the 1 chord. This is the root of the chord. This is the 3rd of the chord because they're 3 notes apart. 1, 2, 3. And then this is the 5th of the chord because it's 5 notes away from the root. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the root, the 3rd, and the 5th of the triad. And since we're starting on the 1st note of the scale, we call that the 1 chord. Now let's look at the 7 chords in a major key. This would be a 1 chord because it's starting on the 1st note of the scale. A 2 chord, the 2nd note of the scale. A 3 or E chord, 3rd note of the scale. 4 chord, or the 4th note of the scale. The 5 chord in the major key, the 6th chord in the major key, the 7th chord in the major key, and back to 1. 1st chord, the 4th chord, and the 5th chord are going to be major chords. And the 2 chord, the 3 chord, and the 6 chord are going to be minor chords. I call that because we're starting on the 2nd note of the scale, a triad starting on the 3rd note of the scale, and a triad starting on the 6th note of the scale. So in a major key, the 1, 4, and 5 chord are normally major, and the 2, 3, and 6 chords are normally minor. And we'll learn the 7th chord in another class. That's a diminished chord. We don't need to know that right now.